Banks now charge you to save money, not through fees, through negative interest rates. You deposit 10,000 euros, and a year later, you have 9,950 euros. Your reward for saving is losing money. This isn't a dystopian fiction. From 2014 to 2022, the European Central Bank implemented negative interest rates across the Eurozone. Major banks charged depositors for the privilege of holding their money. The entire logic of banking, save now to have more later, was inverted. The ECB claimed this would stimulate the economy by forcing people to spend rather than save. But the actual result was wealth confiscation on a massive scale, the destruction of pension funds and insurance companies, and economic stagnation worse than the problem they claimed to be solving. This is the story of how central bankers broke the fundamental relationship between savers and banks, how negative rates transferred wealth from ordinary people to governments and debtors, and why this insane policy reveals that modern central banking has become a mechanism for theft disguised as monetary policy. For thousands of years, banking rested on a simple principle. Savers lend money to banks, banks lend to borrowers, and savers receive interest as compensation for delayed consumption and risk. You deposit money instead of spending it. The bank uses your deposit to make loans. Borrowers pay interest to the bank. The bank pays you a portion of that interest. Everyone benefits. Savers earn returns, borrowers get capital. Banks profit from the spread. This system encourages saving, which creates capital for productive investment. Economies grow because savings fund businesses, infrastructure, and innovation. Interest rates signal the balance between saving and borrowing, rising when capital is scarce, falling when abundant. Positive interest rates also protect savers from inflation. If inflation is 2% but your savings earn 3%, you're accumulating real wealth. Your purchasing power increases over time. This makes saving rational. This isn't complicated economic theory. It's how banking has worked since ancient Mesopotamia. Savers get compensated for lending. That compensation must be positive, or there's no incentive to save. Negative interest rates destroy this entire framework. They punish saving, reward borrowing regardless of purpose, and confiscate wealth from those who delayed consumption to build capital. The European Central Bank introduced negative rates in 2014. Their stated goal was to prevent deflation and stimulate economic growth after the 2008 financial crisis and European debt crisis. The logic went like this. Europe faced low inflation, even deflation risk. In deflation, prices fall, which sounds good but supposedly creates problems. If people expect prices to fall, they delay purchases. Businesses delay investment. Economic activity contracts. A deflationary spiral emerges. To prevent this, the ECB wanted to encourage spending and discourage saving. By making it costly to hold money, they hoped to force money into circulation. Negative rates would push banks to lend, businesses to invest, and consumers to spend. The ECB also wanted to weaken the euro to boost exports. Lower interest rates typically weaken currencies. A weak euro would make European exports cheaper, supporting struggling Mediterranean economies. Additionally, negative rates reduced government borrowing costs. Countries like Italy, Spain, and Greece, with massive debts, could refinance at incredibly low or even negative rates. This provided fiscal relief without requiring painful reforms. The policy was presented as temporary, extraordinary measures for extraordinary times. ECB President Mario Draghi promised to do whatever it takes to preserve the euro. Negative rates were part of that commitment, but the policy lasted 8 years, from 2014 to 2022, and the results were nothing like promised. Negative rates immediately hurt savers. Banks began charging for deposits above certain thresholds. Corporate accounts and wealthy individuals faced explicit negative rates. Small savers didn't see negative rates directly, but received zero interest while inflation continued, creating negative real returns. Pensioners were devastated. Retirement accounts depend on interest income. Someone who saved 500,000 euros expecting 4% annual interest, 20,000 euros, suddenly received nothing or was even charged fees. Their retirement income evaporated. Insurance companies faced crisis. Life insurance policies promise guaranteed returns. With negative rates, insurers couldn't earn enough on safe bonds to meet obligations. Many stopped offering guaranteed return products. Others faced insolvency. Pension funds suffered similarly. They need positive returns to meet long-term obligations to retirees. Negative rates on safe government bonds forced them into riskier assets, stocks, real estate, corporate bonds, creating vulnerability to market crashes. Banks' profitability collapsed. Banks borrow short-term from depositors and lend long-term. Their profit is the spread between borrowing and lending rates. With negative deposit rates but reluctant to charge most customers, banks squeezed margins until many barely broke even. The psychological impact was profound. Saving is responsible behavior, building security and capital. Negative rates told savers they were fools. Spend now, borrow, don't save for the future. This message undermined the foundation of financial stability. The ECB promised negative rates would stimulate growth. They didn't. European economic performance during the negative rate period was dismal. Growth remained weak. Eurozone GDP growth averaged around 1 to 2% annually during negative rates, barely above stagnation. The promised boost to economic activity never materialized. Investment didn't increase. Business investment remained subdued despite cheap credit. Why? Because negative rates signaled economic weakness. Businesses don't invest because borrowing is cheap. They invest when they see profitable opportunities. Negative rates suggested no opportunities existed. Deflation wasn't the real problem. The ECB fought deflation that wasn't actually occurring. Inflation remained positive throughout most of the period. The real problems were structural: lack of competitiveness, rigid labor markets, excessive regulation. Negative rates couldn't fix any of this. Zombie companies proliferated. Cheap credit kept unproductive businesses alive. Companies that should have failed continued operating, taking resources that could have funded productive ventures. This misallocation slowed economic growth. Inequality increased. Asset prices surged as investors fled negative rates. Stocks, real estate, and alternative investments boomed. The wealthy who owned these assets became richer. Savers, typically middle class, saw their wealth eroded. Negative rates transferred wealth upward. Banking sector weakened. European banks became some of the weakest in the developed world. Unable to earn profits, they couldn't build capital buffers. Many required government support. The policy meant to help the economy undermined the financial system. The fundamental problem was treating a structural crisis as a monetary problem. Europe needed reforms: labor market flexibility, reduced regulation, fiscal discipline. Negative rates couldn't address any of this, and actually made problems worse by enabling governments to avoid reforms. Negative rates were wealth confiscation disguised as monetary policy. The transfers were massive and systematic. Who paid? Savers. Anyone with deposits lost purchasing power. Receiving zero interest while inflation ran 1 to 2% meant losing 1 to 2% annually in real terms. Over 8 years, that's 10 to 15% of wealth destroyed. Pensioners. Those living on fixed incomes saw purchasing power decline as interest income disappeared, while living costs continued rising. Insurance policyholders. Guaranteed return policies became impossible to honor. Those who bought insurance expecting specific returns received less or faced insurer insolvency. Future retirees, pension funds unable to earn returns, faced larger funding gaps, meaning reduced benefits for future retirees or higher contributions from workers. Middle class, working people who saved responsibly saw their nest eggs worth less. The fundamental social contract, save now, have security later, was broken. Beyond the economic failure, negative rates represent something deeper: the inversion of economic logic and moral principles that have governed society for millennia. Time preference. Inversion. Humans naturally prefer present consumption to future consumption. Interest rates compensate for delayed gratification. Negative rates claim the future is worth less than the present, inverting human nature and economic reality. Reward reversal. Throughout history, thrift and saving were virtues. The grasshopper who played while the ant saved faced consequences. Negative rates reward the grasshopper and punish the ant. This is moral hazard taken to absurdity. Capital destruction. Savings create capital. Capital funds investment. Investment drives growth. Negative rates discourage the very thing that enables economic development. It's like taxing food production during a famine. Trust destruction. Banking requires trust. You give money to the bank expecting it back with interest. Negative rates break that trust. If banks charge for deposits, why use banks? The entire financial intermediation system depends on positive incentives. Signaling failure. Interest rates should signal economic conditions. Positive rates signal opportunities exist. Negative rates signal opportunities don't exist, so why would anyone invest or take risks? The signal says, the economy is broken and unfixable. Responsibility punishment. Saving for retirement, children's education, or emergencies is responsible behavior. Negative rates punish responsibility while rewarding recklessness. This is perverse incentive at a societal level. The ECB created a world where prudence is penalized, recklessness is rewarded, and the fundamental relationship between present and future is inverted. This isn't monetary policy, it's economic insanity. Negative rates aren't unprecedented, but they're part of a larger pattern called financial repression. Governments using monetary and financial policy to transfer wealth from citizens to the state. After World War II, many countries maintained interest rates below inflation for decades. This reduced government debt in real terms while inflating away citizens' savings. It was slow confiscation, invisible to most people. Negative rates are just explicit financial repression. Instead of hiding the theft behind inflation, central banks openly charge for savings. The honesty is almost refreshing, except that it reveals how brazen the confiscation has become. Historical examples of financial repression all ended badly. 1970s inflation. Governments let inflation run hot while capping interest rates. Savings were destroyed. Eventually, Paul Volcker raised rates to 20% to restore credibility, triggering severe recession. Post-World War II era. Negative real rates. Reduced government debts but destroyed savings. When restrictions lifted, financial crises often followed as systems adjusted. Currency controls. Many countries paired low rates with currency controls, trapping citizens' wealth. This always led to capital flight when controls lifted. The pattern is always the same: short-term fiscal relief for governments, long-term economic damage, eventual crisis when reality reasserts itself. Negative rates follow this pattern perfectly. Negative rates ended in 2022, not because the ECB admitted failure, but because inflation forced their hand. After 8 years of claiming deflation was the danger, inflation surged to 10%. Suddenly, negative rates were untenable. With 10% inflation and negative interest rates, savers were losing over 10% annually in purchasing power. The political pressure became unbearable. The ECB raised rates rapidly, from negative 0.5% to 4% within a year. This was one of the fastest tightening cycles in ECB history. The abrupt reversal revealed that negative rates had been wrong all along. If negative rates were necessary to prevent deflation, how could the ECB suddenly raise to 4%? If the economy couldn't handle positive rates for 8 years, how did it survive going from negative to 4% in months? The answer is that negative rates were never necessary. They were a choice, an experiment, a transfer of wealth disguised as stimulus. When inflation forced them to stop, the ECB simply reversed course and pretended the previous 8 years hadn't happened. The damage, however, remains. Pensions are underfunded, insurance companies are weakened, banks are fragile, savers lost years of returns, and the precedent is set. Central banks can confiscate wealth through monetary policy and face no accountability. After the 2008 crisis, central banks claimed extraordinary measures were needed. Zero rates, then negative rates, then massive money printing. Each was supposed to be temporary. Each became semi-permanent. The justification shifted repeatedly. First, preventing deflation. Then, supporting employment. Then, hitting 2% inflation targets. The real reason remained constant, keeping governments and banks solvent by transferring costs to savers. Now look at the results. Wealth inequality increased, financial instability grew, economic growth remained weak, and when inflation finally surged, central banks were caught completely off guard. The pattern is that central banking has become fiscal policy by another name. Unable or unwilling to make hard choices, governments use central banks to confiscate wealth quietly. Negative rates were just the most explicit version. Central bank policy is not neutral or technical. It has winners and losers. Negative rates consciously chose to benefit debtors, governments, and asset holders at savers' expense. Real returns matter more than nominal rates. Zero interest with 2% inflation equals negative 2% real returns. This is wealth confiscation regardless of what it's called. Diversification beyond bank deposits is essential in a world where central banks punish saving. Assets that hold value independently of monetary policy provide protection. The precedent of negative rates means it could happen again. Central bankers broke the taboo. When the next crisis hits, negative rates might return despite their failure. Being prepared means understanding the pattern. From 2014 to 2022, the European Central Bank implemented negative interest rates, charging people to save money. They claimed this would stimulate growth and prevent deflation. It failed. Growth remained weak. Investment didn't increase. But the policy succeeded at its unstated goal, transferring wealth from savers to governments and debtors. Pensioners lost income. Insurance companies faced insolvency. Middle-class savers saw wealth eroded. Meanwhile, governments borrowed for free, and asset owners became richer. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Negative interest rates weren't monetary policy. They were wealth confiscation. And the precedent they set means central banks can and will do it again when convenient. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.